Hey guys, welcome to my scoop guide. So first I'll start with my build and then we'll get into some gameplay clips so you can see how I play scoop. So on the drop I like to get piggy bank and boots along with both skills, because Frozen Hammer will let you escape from enemies really easy and poke at them, and Binding of Justice lets you stay in longer with heals and also is your main source of damage later on. So when I get enough solar, I like to upgrade Binding of Justice first. It's sort of like Clunk's Explode in that it'll do a lot of damage later on, but it's different in that you really have to stay on them, and in a sense you also don't have to stay on them. I'll explain that in a bit. So Banner of the Triple Scoop, if you fully upgrade it, you will get about 300 damage, but the requirement is that you stay on them the entire time throughout, so each hit does 60 damage when fully upgraded, and you just have to stay on them. So I like to get that upgrade first, and then I upgrade into explosion damage. When fully maxed out, your explosion damage does 330 damage. And it's similar to Clunk's Explode in range in a sense, but if you get next to someone when you activate it, it tends to increase its range for some reason, and it kind of sticks to them. So as long as you keep following them, you might hit them even if they're really far away from you. After I upgrade these two, I like to get the Penguin Throne, which increases your damage on your auto attack, and it's great because it'll just do way more damage and it increases your burst quite a bit, so you'll do maybe around 800 to 900 burst if you manage to stay next to them the entire time and hit them a lot. So after I upgrade the Binding of Justice, I like to get into Frozen Hammer, and Frozen Hammer is more of a situational thing for me. All of these upgrades are really good, but I usually get Twister Lance and damage as my most important ones. Twister Lance, it increases the range of it and also the maximum damage in that sense. So when you hit someone at long range, it'll do around 200 damage, but with max damage upgrades, it does around 440, which is quite nice for getting enemies who are really low on health or just poking at people a lot. And for the third upgrade, it's really up to you. Sometimes I like to get snare just to keep them in place for a bit longer to help me escape, or just to catch up to them. Cooldown's great too for more poking, and since the cooldown of Frozen Hammer is already so low, getting 2 seconds off on it makes it really viable for just a lot of damage. Healing is important sometimes, but since you have Binding of Justice, I don't use this that much. But it's quite good for getting a lot of heals if Binding of Justice just isn't cutting it. And movement speed, I mainly use this against faster enemies like Coco or Raylan, because if I need to escape from them, then the extra movement speed will help, or if I need to catch up to them when I'm chasing after them, the extra movement speed is always a plus. So usually I start out with Binding of Justice and I build into Frozen Hammer or auto attack depending on what I feel is right. And in my auto attack, I pick Chainmail Tunic for the increased attack speed, which is always a must, and definitely Double Liquor Sword for increasing the damage and lifesteal of Cleave. For the third upgrade, it's really between these two depending on whether you're playing with a team or if you're solo K-ing. So if you're playing with a team, get Spoon Man and just stick together so that you increase your damage by a lot, but I usually solo K, so I just usually get the increased slash damage. So Scoop's auto attack is a little weird in that it has one piercing and one non-piercing attack. So Cleave is the piercing, and when it's maxed out it does 100 damage, and Slash is the non-piercing and it does 160 when it's maxed out, so you'll have some variable damage output there. And for the third utility item, I usually recommend either Power Pills or Medican, depending on who you're playing. Usually I get Power Pills because Scoop already has some healing on his Binding of Justice, but Medican's good if you're facing a Gnaw with a lot of dot. So yep, that's about it, and we'll get into some gameplay footage. Alright, see you soon.
Hey guys, we're back with more gameplay footage for Scoop, and so I screwed up on the drop and I was AFK, and so I don't have enough solar for Frozen Hammer, but I'll be getting that shortly enough. At the beginning of the round, I'll just be poking around with both Frozen Hammer and Bindings, just to get damage off on people. Scoop's more of a character that chips away at people at the beginning, rather than does a lot of burst damage, so you're just going to have to keep poking around and chipping at their HP. And here I'm going back for my Frozen Hammer. Alright, so we skipped ahead a bit, and I just got the banner of the triple scoop maxed out, so we should do an extra 300 damage. And here I'm just going to be pushing up, poking with my Frozen Hammer. As you can see there, the range on Bindings is quite nice, and it kind of sticks to them a bit longer than it should. With some help from Ted here and the Frozen Hammer, I get a really easy kill on Raylan, and yep. Here I'm just continuing poking at Vinny and Spike and Yuri, but the idea is to initiate with Frozen Hammer and then drop down on them with your Bindings, or you can just play like you would play Clunk and his Explode, activate it, drop down, and explode like that. Alright, so in this clip we're about to see why Bindings is actually quite useful. I would have died there if it wasn't for Bindings, and it created a nice HP difference between me and Yuri and Vinny, so they wouldn't give chase as much. Frozen Hammer is also great for keeping enemies close by when they're low on HP or near the turret, so that they take extra damage. And I just keep poking with Frozen Hammer a lot, just making sure to do that, and dropping down and chipping away at Raylan's HP. Again, initiating with Frozen Hammer is a good way to get kills, like soon here, I think? Yep. So for some reason Raylan dropped down with really low HP, and I just snared her with Hammer, and Bindings did the rest. So when you're pushing up against turrets, you can also take some of the damage for the droids with your Bindings. Just walk up and activate Bindings at the same time, and you'll be able to take a bit of damage and regain full health. So Bindings is also good at getting people out of sticky situations, and it can snare multiple people, which is very useful. So here we're pushing up, and yep. So this Raylan clearly doesn't know the range of Bindings, and you can easily get people from behind turrets with your Bindings of Justice, and get a lot of kills that way. So Frozen Hammer can be used also as a finisher, not only an initiator like you saw there. And it's quite nice once you get the damage upgrade on it, because then it does somewhere north of 400 damage. Frozen Hammer is also pretty good at stealing health creeps, like right here, from Yuri in this case. And Bindings is always good for doing lots of damage, lots of burst damage. And again, just always keep poking with your Frozen Hammer and just harass them a bit with your Bindings of Justice. Your Bindings of Justice lets you get pretty close to turrets without losing too much HP, so it's always good to just push ahead. And then just trapping people and initiating is, again, a really good way to guarantee kills when you're maxed out. Here I tried to save Ted, but apparently the snare was not long enough because Vinny and Spike was too close to me. I forgot to mention that the farther away your enemy is when you hit them, with bindings, the longer the snare and the higher the damage, as you saw there. And here, it's really useful in close quarters because it bounces everywhere and gets people really easily. And it's quite powerful at getting them. And again, stealing the health creeps is always a good way to keep people low. Scoop does a lot of damage, so once you get snared, it's pretty much over for you. So just keep that in mind, guys, and have a good day.